Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello there, my friends. I hope you are doing very well today. I myself am. I'm very happy to be here with you for the second episode of Highly Sensitive, Happily Married. And today I want to talk about why it matters if you're sensitive or not when it comes to love and marriage. One of the very greatest joys that I have in the work that I do is hearing from women, hearing the immense relief and sense of self-acceptance they feel when they start to understand that nothing's wrong with them, that what's actually been going on for them in their relationships is caused so much by simply not understanding that they are highly sensitive people and how that sensitivity affects them and how, of course, to work with that sensitivity. The other day in my Facebook group, a woman shared, who had just joined, I've been crying all morning with relief. I always thought something was weird or wrong with me, but now I realize that nothing is wrong with me. I'm just a highly sensitive person. This is a kind of thing that I hear so often from people, sometimes through email, sometimes on comments of articles that I've written, or just directly from my clients. So many women tell me this kind of thing. They say things like, as a highly sensitive person, the conclusion I had come to was that I wasn't well suited for a relationship. Now, after learning more about what it means and how it affects relationships, I am thinking of reevaluating. Or someone wrote this, I thought being highly sensitive is a bad thing. Now I realize I just didn't know how to channel it into something positive. Now I know it's good if you just learn how to deal with it. I love hearing these things because it's just so wonderful that these people are starting to realize, wait a second here. I thought I was deeply flawed. And now I realize maybe that's not the case. Maybe I can do a little learning and things will be incredibly different in not just my relationships, but in my whole life. So this is really true. This personality trait, this high sensitivity can either be a hindrance if we don't know it, or we don't know how to work with it, or it can be an asset. And again, it really just depends on how well you understand and nurture this part of you. For me, I believe knowing how to work with it, even just understanding that I was highly sensitive could have kept the love alive in my first marriage. So I was married to a man out of college. Like, it was a little while after college we got married. We had kids, and we took on normal life. We had kids. We built a house. Maybe that wasn't so normal. We had work. We took on a lot, and neither of us understood that we were highly sensitive until after our marriage fell apart. After our marriage crumbled under the stress of a life that really just simply felt like too much to us. Typical of highly sensitive people living in this fast-paced, sort of aggressive, sort of unforgiving culture that most of us live in. My husband and I, my ex-husband and I, my husband at the time, who actually turns out he's a highly sensitive person too. Didn't know it, like I didn't. I think we both kind of had this like under the surface ongoing question of like, what is wrong with me? Why is everything so overwhelming? Feeling run down a lot, feeling flawed, feeling kind of negative and grouchy and all those things. And without understanding the unique needs of highly sensitive people, we just kept pushing through, going about life as we always had, trying to make it all work the way we thought we ought to, the way our kind of non-sensitive culture had taught us that we should, right? And I'm sure I'll tell you more stories about it, but the short version of the story is that pushing through like that, not understanding how to work with our sensitive nervous systems really backfired. And eventually we ended up getting divorced. So I really just want to understand for now, I want to emphasize that understanding our sensitivity is the key. How sensitivity affects us, and particularly our relationships and our marriages, is so, so important, right? Like I said, it can make or break your relationship. So like me, it's quite possible that you're listening to this podcast and you actually don't even know for sure yet whether you are a highly sensitive person. Maybe you were just kind of intrigued by the title. Or maybe you know for sure that you are, but you don't fully understand it deeply, right? Especially when it comes to relationship. I think a lot of what happens is, as it was for me, a lot of people don't actually realize they're highly sensitive until it comes into relationships, right? Until it comes to relationships, I should say. Like they might have, like for me, I had sort of less obvious signs of sensitivity. Like, for example, I, as a child and all my life, I've enjoyed dim lighting. Like I haven't liked really bright lights. And when I read, I prefer dim lights. And my stepfather would always come around and tell me I was going to go blind and would turn a brighter light on, So there were lots of little things like that, lots of those signs, but it really didn't become very apparent to me until I was in a committed relationship, until I was married. Then my sensitivity was like, boom. Okay. So that is a very common experience. And I want to let you know that when your sensitivity really comes out, if you start being like, something's weird here, you start seeing that because of all the things going on in your marriage, like maybe all these hard things coming up in your marriage, I want you to know that when you can start to see that, it's actually really a good thing, right? Because then you can finally start understanding yourself and get to work to understand and work with your trait and really reap the immense benefits of doing so. Like having the love you always thought you could probably have, but until now maybe has always felt really elusive, right? So it really matters to understand it because self-awareness is everything, right? Knowing what we're dealing with is how we learn to deal with it, right? So like just take the example of of an illness of some sort. Like, it's key to know, like right now with a coronavirus outbreak or a pandemic, right? Like it's really important to know whether you have the coronavirus, if you have a fever, or if you have a stomach bug, right? Because, and maybe that's not the best example, but when we know what kind of illness we're dealing with, we'll then know how to treat it, right? You'll work with it differently. So that's why understanding sensitivity matters. So you can address it and work with it, right? But I want to be careful with that last sort of analogy because it's so important to understand that high sensitivity is absolutely not an illness, okay? It's not a mental illness. It does not mean that there's anything wrong or flawed about you. It's a personality trait, okay? So I want to explain that a little bit more for those of you who don't know what high sensitivity is. So the definition of a highly sensitive person is someone who experiences strong physical, mental, or emotional responses to stimuli, okay? It's actually called, the more technical term for it is highly sensitive. Wait, I'm saying that wrong. It's called sensory processing sensitivity. Okay, sensory processing sensitivity. So it's not a disorder. It's just that we sensitive humans have neural differences. We have brain differences, nervous system differences, right? It's a trait that's found in, like I said last time, I think between 15 and 30%. Most people say it's 20% of humans. And actually they find this trait in a variety of other species. Perhaps it's in all of them. They just haven't studied all the species to determine this. And, you can totally Google what highly sensitive is and learn a lot more about it just in general. So please feel free to do that. But just briefly, like the difference, some of the differences that I'll share more in a minute, especially how they show up in a relationship. But some of the basic difference for us is that we process all forms of stimulation much more deeply than the other 80% of humans, right? So we process external stimuli like sights and sounds and people's faces and their emotional cues, right? Very deeply. And really important here is we process our own internal world, like the stimuli coming from inside of us, like our thoughts, our feelings, and maybe even our body sensations much more deeply, right? So they're like more, what's the word? More obvious to us. Okay. So yeah. So this is amazing. Like there's so many wonderful things about this, and there's so many challenging things about this. And I'm going to share all about the amazingness of highly sensitive people in the next episode. So you can skip ahead to that if you want to hear that first before you hear some of the challenges today. I want to talk about the challenges though, because, it will free you up to know how to work with it. Right. So first step to learning how to address it is to recognize that these are the things that we deal with as highly sensitive people. These are the difficult things. I hear women also tell me things like, being highly sensitive, I assume and take things really personally. And I truly create more problems for myself. And this actually was like sort of a catch-all statement that many of us, that can hold true for many of us, right? It can be like we're creating problems for ourselves where there don't need to be any. So as I shared, like my sensitivity, my unknown sensitivity really caused all sorts of troubles in my marriage just because I didn't know how to work with it. And I now know that I was far from alone, right? I now see that there's a whole set of things that we highly sensitive people are challenged with in our relationships, right? So I love being an example of, what not to do and, what to do so that you don't end up separated or divorced or having a really, really, really hard time in your marriage, right? Because knowing how to work with your sensitivity absolutely can help you avoid all of these hard things in most marriages, okay? So I want to point out the ways that our sensitivity can actually undermine lasting love and how I see, like the challenges that I see that creep into so many relationships. So I want to make sure, like, as I share these with you, how parts of our sensitivity may negatively affect your relationship. Like, just notice which ones might be true for you. Right? I want you to try to stay curious and open, and know that not all of the things I'm about to share with you will be true for you. Right? We're all unique humans. Even though we might all be highly sensitive here, we're all humans first and foremost, right? So we have different challenges anyway. We're all unique. So just pay attention to which ones like resonate with you, right? And I want to make sure to invite you to bring a very big dose of kindness and compassion to yourself. And just know that being willing to take a good look at yourself and understand yourself is actually a loving gift to you, right? Because it's the thing that will allow you to begin making yourself happier, your marriage happier, okay? So here's a non-comprehensive list of ways that high sensitivity can cause challenges, let's just say. So one of the biggies is feeling easily overstimulated, feeling easily stressed, feeling easily overwhelmed. For me and my ex-husband, having children, owning a home, all of that stuff that sort of seemed kind of more or less easy for others, which I know is not really fully true, but those were totally exhausting and overwhelming for us. So it's a common experience for highly sensitive people to feel overwhelmed and overstimulated when not so super self-aware or knowing how to take care of themselves. So, and this is because we process so much so deeply, right? And that just takes bandwidth. That just takes energy. Feeling deeply, processing emotion a lot, that takes energy and your bandwidth. So especially if that's negative emotion or you're just overdoing things, you're doing so much in your life, like your nervous system is processing every piece of information over and over deeply, and often even magnifying that information. So again, it can lead to feeling very overstimulated, very overwhelmed, very exhausted. And when that's going on, our ability for patience goes down. Our irritability levels go up. We might have a short fuse, right? My coach has always said, when emotion is strong, intelligence is low. This is really true. So for us, like our relational intelligence, our relationship intelligence, like our emotional intelligence, our ability to interact and feel good, interact well and feel good, actually goes down when we are stressed. This is true with all humans, but for highly sensitive people, we seem to be stressed more easily. That's simply because we're taking in more, we're processing more. It's not actually that we're stressed quicker. It seems as though we have a lower threshold for stress. I like to say that we sensitive people can become insensitive when we aren't emotionally centered. And we are not emotionally centered when we are stressed. They just don't go hand in hand. They're like diametrically opposed from each other, emotional centeredness and stress. Okay. So we tend to need a lot of quiet downtime or just downtime or alone time to be at our best. But one of the other challenges that is very common for highly sensitive people is that we might not give ourselves that downtime or that decompression time that we need, because we have this tendency to be so concerned with being a good partner, a good parent, a good friend, because we care so deeply about other people. Okay, so that's a beautiful thing about our trait. We care a ton. We have big hearts, but we can be overly concerned with being, caring for others. And we can be also super invested in not upsetting our partner because we dislike the intense negative feelings that come up when our partner is upset or when we're having conflict with them. All right. So that might sound really familiar. In that, like that over care about how others are, feeling or making sure we're showing up as a good, caring partner, that can actually undermine us because we then won't take care of our own self. We won't set boundaries, et cetera, et cetera. I'll get into all of this in other episodes. Another thing that is very common for highly sensitive people is that we have what I call flaw sight. As highly sensitive people, one of the things about us is we see more details, right? We're very aware of subtleties. We're deeply observant by nature. And so we notice small things, including flaws, things that are going wrong, problems, around us. And we see those much more clearly, and they loom large to us, right? We see them so much. And we could even ruminate on them and fixate on them and stay focused on them, right? For example, when, like maybe your partner has started to, over the last week, spend a lot more time staring at his iPhone. If that were the case, a common thing for highly sensitive people would be to notice the absence of his attention, notice his focus on the iPhone instead of on you, and experience that lack of his attention or love acutely, right? And feel maybe even abandoned, maybe unloved, or maybe just annoyed and resentful, right? I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but I know plenty of people, highly sensitive people, who have. Also, let's see. Another very common one, this was very, very true for me, is that we highly sensitive can have high standards. Okay, we tend to have high standards for ourselves because we're so conscientious, right? And we also have high standards for others oftentimes, right? We might, like for me, it was like I was expecting my husband to be as communicative, as in touch with his feelings, as interested in connection as I was, right? Yeah, and because we love deep connection so much, we kind of can't imagine that others don't or aren't as interested, right? And so we naturally assume others will be. And when they aren't as interested as, as we are in, caring for each other or having that deep connection or whatever it is that we actually tend to show up as, we feel disappointed or maybe even hurt that they aren't living up to those ideals that we have. Okay. And part of like the reason we feel disappointed and hurt is because we have this tendency to take things personally. Totally common for highly sensitive people. We have one of the differences in our brains, the non-sensitives, is that we have brains. I mean, all brains love to interpret, but especially highly sensitive people, part of the brain's job is to interpret things going on, particularly other people, okay? For highly sensitive people, other human beings are like the brightest stars in our sky. And they're the things that we notice the most. We're very oriented around relationships and other people. So in the highly sensitive brain, almost everything about our brain is wired to notice others and interpret them, what they're doing, how they're feeling, right? And we can have this tendency, and I promise to go into great detail in this in the future, but we can have this tendency to interpret things going on in other people in a way that works against love. For example, like if our partner doesn't do the dishes, or he uses when my husband will use a funny tone. I've had this tendency, and so many sensitive people have this tendency to I don't do this so much anymore. I used to do this all the time. But we can interpret that like funny tone that they use to mean that they don't care about us, right? Again, like taking it very personally. That our brain tends to interpret things in that way. And my theory on this, after working with hundreds of women, is there are two big reasons for this. And there are probably other reasons, but these are the ones that I understand right now. Again, like I said, we have a brain that tends to see flaws, to see what's going wrong, to see what's missing, right? And so we notice that negative tone really easily, right? And then maybe we interpret it to be to take it personally because many of us, highly sensitives, have had this feeling of being not quite enough. I talked about this in last episode. Because it was likely implied to so many of us that we were kind of weird, or, something was wrong with us, or we cried too easily and we were told we're too sensitive and we're just not the majority of humans, right? Or like this 20% who are slightly different. And so we can feel like the black sheep. We can feel like something's wrong with us. We can feel not quite good enough. And we can internalize all of that to really, deeply mean that something's wrong with us, something's not good enough about us. It can really be a trademark wound that highly sensitive people walk around with, feeling not enough. So it can lead to us interpreting our partner's behavior as like, see, I'm not enough. He doesn't care about us. He doesn't care about me, I should say. And that feeling of not enough, that can lead also to neediness in relationships, being really needy or wanting so much affection and approval. It can lead to controlling behaviors. This was really me. Like I was, I definitely had this tendency to control or want to try to control. We can try to control. It doesn't usually succeed. Tell you more about that later. It can like this sense of not enough-ness can also lead to a big fear of opening up and just being truly ourselves in intimate relationships, all of which can create distance. Okay. Another thing is we tend to take things quite seriously as highly sensitive people, which in our marriages can lead to worry, like obsessive thoughts and heartache when things aren't going very well. Like, right, we can make a bigger deal out of a hard week or whatever. We can kind of over focus on it. We can take it extremely seriously and then feel really bad and more disconnected. So all of these things show up in our communication, right? For me, communication was definitely an issue, as it is with so many of us sensitives and just human beings in general. It is, I think when all of this stuff is going on for us, it can be easier to blame our partner for, doing things wrong, or it can be easy to complain or to snap at him or, demand things. That was a thing that I did a lot. In my first marriage, I tended to complain or point out how he's doing things wrong, what he should be doing instead, right? Or another one that I see a lot with people is they don't communicate at all, right? They shut down. They might give a cold shoulder. They might simmer and upset, which actually is communication. It's just not verbal communication, right? We're always communicating with our body language and such. So all of these things, and we can also be kind of nitpicky. We can be kind of critical. And all of these things can set off our partner's defenses. Okay, it can get our partner being defensive or shutting down and closing down themselves, getting aloof. I often hear my clients say that their husbands tell them that they feel like they can't do anything right, that they never do anything right. So I don't know if you've ever heard your partner say that, but it's very common for highly sensitive women to hear that from their partners. And truly, like, that is not a great recipe for loving connection and intimacy, right? All these things that I've just shared. There's a whole lot more. I think one last little thing I want to share about some of the challenges that we can experience as highly sensitives in relationships is that we, if our partner is moody or depressed or anxious, which is not uncommon in our world, it can be especially hard for highly sensitive people because we do tend to take others' feelings on as our own, right? So we can kind of feel depressed ourselves when our partner is depressed, for example. And this is not a woo-woo thing. This is actually that we have more active mirror neurons than non-sensitive people. So it's a kind of neuron in our brain that actually, it's like a reflection, right? A mirror. So that it's like when we look at someone or we hear something from them, like when we look at a depressed person's face, we will actually, all humans will do this, we just do it more as highly sensitive people. We actually feel it in us, like as if it's in us. We like have these mirror neurons, they like mimic the other person's experience, but inside us, just not as extreme as. So we might feel a little depressed when our partner feels really depressed, for example, right? The beautiful thing about mirror neurons and our ability to kind of feel what other people feel is that it makes us more in tune with others, more sensitive to others in the best of ways. So I want you to look forward to the next episode when I talk more about this. Okay. But one thing I do want to offer here is that as highly sensitive people, our brains are one of, if not the most powerful social machine in the universe. Like, so amazing. And so all these things that I'm sharing about the challenges, I want you to know they're like more than outweighed by the amazing nature of like the good things that come along with sensitivity. So look forward to that in next episode. But if any of the things that I shared so far resonates with you, I don't want you to feel bad about yourself. Never fear. Because there really is so much good about to come your way, because you are seeing and learning about yourself, your sensitivity. And if you suspected, if you've not thought of yourself as a highly sensitive person, and now you're like, those things sound really familiar, maybe I am a highly sensitive person, then I absolutely welcome you to explore what that means. Like, look up high sensitivity a little bit more. I have something for you I'll share at the end of this episode. Because understanding yourself, understanding the trait of high sensitivity is everything, right? Because when we see it, we can address it and we can learn to work with it so it works for us in our marriages and all of our relationships. So, understanding ourselves is always the first step to changing things and making things better. My own personal understandings of what was going on for me, that I was highly sensitive, and these things were all happening because I'm highly sensitive and I didn't know how to deal with it. This completely revolutionized my love life to start understanding this. It empowered me to learn the skills and do the inner work to amplify the beautiful qualities inherent in the trait of sensitivity. And it made it possible for me to have this amazing marriage with my second husband that just truly gets better and better as time goes on. Understanding my sensitivity changed everything. And I want you to know that that's possible for you too. That's absolutely possible. And that's what this podcast is here. And it really just starts with knowing yourself. So for now, I invite you to just start noticing how your sensitivity shows up in your relationship, how it affects you, your feelings, your communications, the things you do in your relationship, like whether you close off a lot or snap a lot. Like, just, you maybe even want to re-listen to this episode and really pick out the things that sound like they might be you, and then start observing how those things are currently showing up in your relationship. If you want to see some more things, or if you want to see like a written list of, I think I even have more of the unique challenges of highly sensitive people in a written form in a list on my website. I will put a link to that page on my website in the show notes. It's kind of like a easier list to look at, and it's just key. And check those out. See if they're ones that I missed that resonate with you, or that I didn't talk about on the podcast that resonate with you. Look for that in the show notes. And for now, my hope is that this actually brings you some relief, right? These understandings bring you some relief. Like the relief of I'm normal. I'm just highly sensitive. Okay. And I also hope that this brings you some curiosity about how your sensitivity can actually support you having the best love possible. Because I truly believe that that's what's in store for you, that you have it in you to have the best love possible on this planet because you are highly sensitive. So, again, look for the next episode where I get into that. And go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already done that so you don't miss any episodes. And for now, enjoy being curious about how your sensitivity shows up. And I hope you have a great week. And I look forward to talking to you in the next episode. Be so well.